We try to show to you only some of the accounts of the victims of the crimes and denigrating treatment by Ukrainian army and nationalists. We have many more. This is only a small fraction. We document them to ensure accountability for those who committed these crimes. But because of time limits, we will stop at this point and give the floor to our distinguished briefers. They come from different countries, but have one thing in common. They all have first-hand experience of working in areas of our special military operation. Many of them were also covering the 8 years-long war waged by Ukraine against residents of Donetsk and Lugansk. Our first briefer hardly needs any introduction. We have the pleasure to welcome Laure Bonnel, French journalist who has already done invaluable work to shed light on the life of civilian population of Donbass, who has been simply cancelled in the humane West. Please.
Good morning. The 2022 Russian offensive is a tragedy for Ukraine. But let's keep in mind that Eastern Ukraine has suffered since 2014. The past throws light upon the present. May 2014, Ukrainian helicopter gunship firing at civilians, killed instantly or worse, still alive and speaking, whilst their body cut in two. These images will forever haunt people from the East. Along with Odessa massacre, these crimes have not gone unpunished. So, yes, I do hope the negotiation, a peace agreement, are still possible. Moreover, we are the few French reporters who witnessed the latest developments. My testimony is in tune with those of my colleagues, Lise Romboudoul from TF1, the first French journal, documents shooting and killing in Donetsk. Furthermore, the American training of volunteers was reported by journalist Régis Le Sommier during his stay in Odessa. Peace is not made only by written agreements. Peace is made and maintained by peoples. How appeasement can be guaranteed after a conflict if the communities have been turned against each other, armed again and again, and have learned to hate and detest one another? Sending ever heavier and deadlier weapons to Ukraine. Leaders of the countries not involved in the conflict only contribute to further escalation, resulting in ever more victims, tears, and resentment for years and decades to come. Flooding a country with arms is nowhere near United Nations. Do not forget your primary role. The entire world has to urge for dialogue and mediation immediately in a bid to restore peace. Pushing Germany towards remilitarization endangers Europe. The continent is on the verge of a collapse. A world war with the epicenter in Europe is becoming more and more plausible. Nuclear danger has to be taken seriously. The conflict has been going on for 8 years. Is it the lack of dialogue and failure to fulfill previous commitments that resulted in the tragic invasion we now regret? I will forever wonder. The solution, if any, is in your hands. Humanity relies on you, and the virtue of meetings like that of Mr. Guterres on April 26, 2022 in Moscow. Every life lost is a failure. Every life saved is a victory. Today, in this sanctuary of the United Nations, it is you who guard the deals and conscience. Heavy responsibility and tremendous honor wanting to, you showed encourage you to prioritize peaceful disarmament. I'd like to conclude with a quote. Humanity is cursed if it is condemned to kill forever for the sake of showing courage. Courage is rather about not resorting to force in a conflict that can be resolved by reason. Thank you. Now I would like to show you some of my witnesses from the heart of the Donbass. Thank you.
Как вы вышли из города?
Пришли военные.
ДНР?
Ну, наверное, ДНР, да. Сперва они ночевали у нас в гараже, а потом утром нас забрали, вывели.
А скажите, в каком районе Мариуполя вы живете?
Ну, это левый берег. Окраина, левый берег.
Позвольте вопрос. Вот Азов что делает с мирными гражданами? Насколько вам известно, удерживает людей? Как?
Я ничего не знаю, мы сидели дома в подвале с детьми. Что там кто делает, я без понятия. О коридорах я не слышала, не знаю.
Скажите, пожалуйста, вы видели какую-то военную технику в жилых застройках? Вот,
БТР.
то есть технику ставят в жилых застройках?
Ну, ставили на нашей улице, там, да, во дворе родном.
Как вас зовут?
Анна.
Азов занимает жилые дома, бьют людей, не выпускают с домов. Обстановка в городе крайне печальная.
Как конкретно происходит?
Конкретно происходит. Бьют прикладами, не выпускают с домов.
А как у тебя получилось выбраться из города?
Выбраться из города? Я ушел по берегу. Я ушел по берегу моря, по частным и по полям. Я дошел до трассы, я прошел 17 километров.
Vous pouvez me dire ce qui s'est passé à Mariupol, comment s'est passé le corridor?
Я знаю точно, что людей не выпускают с домов, их бьют прикладами и заставляют их сидеть дома. Батальон Азов не позволяет ни пройти, ни проехать. Я лично знаю человека, которому просто не дали выйти.
Prouve bien que vous avez donc toutes ces coordonnées, ces informations. Ukraine, il accuse le bataillon Azov d'exactions contre la population.
А вы знали, что коридоры есть?
Нет. Сказали, идите, собирайте фонарик, берите вещи и идите в бомбоубежище. Все, что сказали.
То есть вас вывели донецкие военные,
Да, вывели Донецк. Они вечером пришли, они у меня ночевали, охраняли нас.
Расскажи, как себя вели украинские военные.
Да никак, они ни слова, ни полслова ничего не говорили. Мы спрашивали, что делать, как здесь с детьми быть, что, как эвакуация будет какая-то. Нет, у меня 3 маленьких деток. И как выходить, никто ничего не говорил. Говорили, берите все необходимое, идите в бомбоубежище. Все, что они сказали. Они, наверное, направленно так делали. Люди стояли, оставались на местах. Насколько я слышал, они жилые сектора заводили гаубицы свои и оттуда палят.
Как тебя зовут?
Илья
А фамилия?
Клочко.
I thank Laure Bonnel. And our second brief is Giorgio Bianchi, Italian photojournalist, director, filmmaker, and writer. He covered widely the armed conflict in Syria and the Ukrainian crisis starting from Euromaidan. In his work, Giorgio always pays particular attention to humanitarian and anthropological issues. He also made interview with a young lady, Marianna, whose photos spread with rocket speed around the Western media as a victim of the alleged Russian artillery attack on the maternity hospital in Mariupol. How many times we have heard in the Security Council these blatant lies from our Western colleagues. Giorgio, the floor is yours.
Good evening. It is truly an honor for me to be here. I recently returned from Donbass, where for about 2 months I documented the conflict. I have to say that I was expecting the difference between the reality on the field and in the media, but not at these levels. I can understand Russian propaganda. I can understand Ukrainian propaganda. What remains incomprehensible to me is European propaganda. With the Russian media censored and with all the so-called official media aligned on the Ukrainian propaganda, for the European public, I'm European, it is practically impossible to form an objective opinion on the reality on the ground. For this reason, more and more people are asking to the web for balanced information. Governments and digital platforms, instead of questioning themselves about this phenomenon, are trying to limit access to information online. It seems like their goal is to endorse a single narrative of the facts. War is dramatic in itself, and I know something about it. But there is no need to make it even more horrifying by flooding ether and paper with fake news. I think it is useful to anyone to feed the conflict. I think it is useful to anyone to feed the conflict or widen it, feeding hatred. It seems to me that there is a sort of interest to ensure that the conflict lasts a long time and spreads. I have personally exposed several fake news spread in the European media. The shameful front page of La Stampa, which cunningly attributes to the Donetsk death of March 14 to the Russians. The fact that Mariana, the girl who was the symbol of the bombing of the Mariupol hospital, had not been kidnapped by the Russians. The fact that the Russians were not deporting civilians from Mariupol. They could not evacuate all the civilians who wanted to leave. They certainly did not take away those who wanted to stay. On the contrary, I have shown that Ukrainian soldiers and militias have extensively used civilians as human shields. The testimonies I have collected are dozens, and the very majority of them confirm it. There is no trace of this fact-checking in the mainstream press. What game are we playing? Do we want the Third World War? Do we want to reduce European populations to misery with sanctions? I am an independent reporter. My work has been recognized internationally, but I cannot work in Ukraine because I'm on a blacklist, Miratvorets, in which I'm defined as a criminal, only for doing my job and bringing my point of view to the audience, a point of view documented by 8 years of work on the field. Today, I'm accused by the audience of being an embedded professional, but I can't work on the other side because I risk to be arrested. Do you think it's normal? Another time, what game are we playing? For sure, it is a very dangerous game. Thank you very much.
I think Giorgio Bianchi, and I'd like to give the floor and greet